Hello and welcome back to Stephen C. Ministries. Today we are joined by Dana Emanuel. Dana is a former paranormal investigator who has now dedicated her ministry to exposing the demonic deception so prevalent within that practice. Dana does an excellent job in this interview of sharing her story, exposing the paranormal, and encouraging people to turn to Jesus. And hey, if you get any value out of this video, why don't you consider liking, subscribing, and joining the community? Enjoy the podcast. Okay, so Dana, everybody's just heard a little bit about you in a brief introduction video. Thank you again so much for coming on. Would you mind telling us a little bit more about your story?
Well, thank you, Stephen. Thanks for having me on. I really appreciate it. I used to be interested in the paranormal when I was growing up, even as a child. I used to love watching anything to do with the paranormal and ghosts and things like that. I used to go over to my dad's house on the weekends and watch it over there on TV, and anything that had to do with it, I really was always interested and very fascinated by it. So it was easy for me later on in life when I started to have paranormal activity start happening in our home for me to really, get interested into it. So it actually all started the paranormal activity. I started having experiences when I was living with my grandmother. I moved in with her to take care of her. She had Alzheimer's and she was bedridden, and they needed someone to move in and take care of her. So I already had a background in caregiving. So I went ahead and I moved in. It was me and my whole family. So while we were living there, we started, hearing things in the middle of the night. And some of the family members would tell me, they would say, "Oh, Dana, it's probably your grandpa. He's watching over your grandmother." Because my grandfather died like 15 or 18 years. I can't remember exactly, but it was like many years before, I moved in there. So, that was the belief. Everybody always talked about that. So we did start hearing footsteps. We had, like, my grandmother had a little musical box, and it had a rose inside of it that I think that actually he gave her years ago. It was in her room, and every now and again it would start on its own. And now my grandmother was literally, her legs were contracted in a fetal position, so she was not able to get up. So we knew it wasn't her. And my kids, it was always a time that we knew it wasn't my kids, or it was not, obviously it wasn't her. So, we would have things like that happen. Then we would hear noises in the kitchen at night. And our bedroom, the way it was set up, our bedroom was set up in the old family room, which was right next to the kitchen. And what was dividing us in that room was a glass sliding door. And at nighttime, we would leave it open because of the air conditioner, so it would get cool in our room. And so we would oftentimes wake up and be hearing the noises, and it would wake us up. Well, usually the activity would stop, whenever you'd wake up and you'd be like, "I know I just heard noises in there." But then this one night in particular, I was laying there and the noises, I kept hearing it, and it disturbed me so much that I woke up, and I still had my eyes closed, and I kept hearing it. And I was so scared to open my eyes to look over, because you could actually see the kitchen from our room. I was so scared to look over there to see what it was every time I'd hear another noise. And I'm like, okay, well, maybe it's my kids. I don't know. So finally, I went to open my eyes. And when I opened my eyes and I looked over, literally, I seen the chair scoot across the floor. And when that happened, I knew there was something paranormal happening. I jumped out of the room. I jumped out the side, because we had a door that was on the side of that room. And I ran out that side door. Well, when I did, I had went across my husband to get out that door. So my husband woke up and he's like, "What's going on?" So he followed me out there, and I explained to him what happened, and I was crying. I was upset. Now, even though I was interested in the paranormal stuff, when it does happen like that, it really spooks you. So when that happened, my husband, he calmed me down and everything, and he kept telling me, and he was like, "Dana, it's probably just your grandpa. He's probably just looking after your grandma." And he said, "It's never done anything to hurt us, so maybe that's all it is." And truthfully, we couldn't really afford to just pack up and move. And plus, my grandmother needed someone there, and they didn't have anybody else. So I'm like, okay, all right. So, you know, things started to calm down. That was the most of what happened at that house. So, but my interest in the paranormal suddenly took a turn. It was no longer I was just interested in the paranormal stuff. I now started to ask myself, well, wait a minute, if that's grandfather, wouldn't that mean he's not in heaven now? And if he's not in heaven, why is he here? Is it, what happens to us when we die? So I started really getting into it then. And I started buying all the books and, going to the local library and, reading everything I could about it. And then we started going to the local graveyards. When I say we, I mean me and my kids. Now, my husband was never interested in it. Although he calmed me down that night, he was always very afraid of paranormal stuff happening because he had experiences actually when he was young, and it really scared him. So I mean, to this day, if I ever even bring up what happened in the past with us, he'll tell me right away, I don't want to talk about it. I'm just afraid of something. We start talking about something's going to happen. He's really afraid of it. So anyway, so me and my kids would go to the graveyards, and sometimes I would get friends to go, people we knew that was interested. I had relatives too, like my cousin and people like that. And we would go out, and um the one night, it was the first night that we went to a local graveyard. I took a digital recorder, audio recorder, and then we had our little handheld cameras, and we went out there and we started taking pictures. And the very first um at the very opening of the graveyard, there's this one really tall um monument, not a monument, well, what would you call it, a monument, a gravestone, a real tall one. And it was right at the beginning of the thing, so that was the first one we stopped at. And I stopped there and I started asking questions. And I was asking, what people usually ask when they do these ghost hunts. They, show me a sign, is anybody here? What's your name? Things like that. Excuse me. Well, I did ask what's your name, but see, the recorder I had, what we would do, actually, I'm sorry, it was not a digital recorder, it was a little tape recorder. That's what it was. And what we did was we didn't listen to the audio, you know, um, instantaneously as we went along and did the investigation. We would go home and then we would analyze it. Then we would, get our answers and stuff if we got any activity answers or EVPs, which is electronic voice phenomena. I guess I should mention that. But so anyway, when I sat there and I asked the questions and everything, at the end of the investigation, we went home and I started listening to the recording. And at the very first of it, the very first grave that we stopped at, I asked, "What is your name?" And I got just as clear as a bell, a voice tell me it said Frank. Well, it didn't, I thought about it and I'm like, wait a minute, what was the name on that grave? I didn't, number one, I didn't look. I should have, and I didn't have a picture of that actual grave. So I told my daughter, I said, we need to go back tomorrow and look and see if the name really is Frank. Well, we went back the next day and sure enough, it was Frank. So I knew, okay, we got something, and it told me a correct answer and everything. And then we also got a photo of an apparition. And I don't know if anybody out there, just to mention, an apparition is a picture of a spirit that's manifested partially, usually it's where you can see through it. So anyway, we got the picture of that. It actually looked like somebody in a KKK uniform is what it really looked like. Yeah. And then right behind it, you could see three very distinct orbs. They were not like the little typical dust orbs that people see, in the on the movies and shows, but it was actually like they looked just like little balls of fire. They did. And so anyway, we got all this evidence, and then like the more evidence I collected, the more interest I got, with this stuff. And um we started doing like ghost hunts. We started going to like the local haunts, places that are famous to be haunted. We live actually like 2 hours away from St. Augustine, Florida. And that's like a typical ghost town in Florida. Everybody goes there that's interested in the paranormal, that live in Florida usually. But anyway, we would go there and we got activity there. A lot of different things happened. One night we was there, we went for the weekend, me and my daughter. And while we were there, my husband, of course, stayed home. He's, like I said, he's not interested in it and never was. And so we went to the investigations and stuff that was going on there. And we went to the old jail. And while we were there, we kind of went off to the side by ourselves and we started sitting there with some recorders and we were asking questions. And it was weird because my husband, like I said, he wasn't there. He didn't know where we were at, what we were doing that night, because we were there for the whole weekend or anything. And as a matter of fact, I hadn't even talked to him that evening. So while we were there and I'm sitting there asking questions, my husband called me and I answered the phone and I says, yeah. And he says, Dana, I don't know where you're at or what you're doing, but stop it. And I said, why? What's going on? And he said, Dana, please just stop it. And I said, what? What's going on? He was really upset. And he told me what had happened was a ball that was sitting on the floor in front of him in the living room. It started to go across the room. It went through the dining room, through the kitchen, went through across the hallway on the other side and coming through the other side of the living room to the door that goes into the hallway and came circled all the way back in front of him and stopped right where it started. And he, so he was really upset and he he always asked me to stop doing what I was doing. And but I was so interested in it. I was actually, at this point, I was really getting obsessed with it. I mean, it was like every weekend, pretty much, we were going to do investigations somewhere. Even if it was just to the places around here that we knew of that we had got activity at before. Like there was a house on Merritt Island, Florida, that was a vacant house. We had got permission from the owner and we would go there and it was open, and it didn't cost anything. It was just, but anyway, we'd go there and we'd have our fun and we'd get our evidence and things like that. Well, after I did that for a certain amount of time, it was a couple years. Well, then I got online. I got my first computer and I got online and I got on some meetup groups. And then with other people that were interested in the paranormal and stuff. And then one day I was on, what's the name of it? Craigslist. And I don't know if you know what that is, but it's like where you can place ads and things like that. And there was a guy on there and he was looking, he had a paranormal investigation team and he was looking for some members. So I called him and come to find out he had went to a lot of the investigations and stuff that the ghost hunters and then went to. And he was, telling us all about the places he went to and how exciting it was. And, and he wanted us to join and, come on board. And I told him the experience I had and the equipment I had and things like that. So anyway, so we joined his team and then we really started going to a lot of places and we started, I mean, even going out of state, like he would get phone calls and, people that had haunted homes and stuff like that. And we would go and, do our investigations there and stuff. But so I did investigations with him for, oh, I don't even remember how many years. It was probably maybe about like 5 years or something like that. But then I started accumulating my own equipment and stuff. And me and him, we had a little bit of problems, personal problems. So I ended up just starting my own group and, got my own enough equipment, like I said, for my own team. And then we started really going out and doing other investigations and, going out on our own. So, and then I started noticing now, mind you, I really needed to mention that although I was interested in the occult and the field of the paranormal and everything, I also was raised a Christian. Now, I never heard anything. I always heard, of course, that when you die, you go to heaven or hell. But I didn't never hear anything about what I was doing was wrong. As far as like with the occult, I didn't even know what that meant. I never studied a Bible. I didn't know anything about what was in the Bible. I just went and listened to the sermon and couldn't wait to get out of there to go home. I just went to please my dad because my dad was, he always wanted me to go to church and stuff like that. Although he liked scary movies, that's about the extent that he was with it. But
And so, Dana, as I understand it, you had one terrifying experience that really caused you to doubt the worldview that you had at that time and caused you to start doubting some of the spiritual experiences that you were having. Could you tell us a little bit more about that?
yes, it was an investigation that we had. It was in Palm Bay, Florida, and it was a man that was being thrown, and he was getting physical harm, from the spirit. And actually, one time when he got thrown, he went to the hospital because it hurt his back. When he was at the hospital, yeah, when he went to the hospital and told the doctor what happened, the doctor admitted him into Circles of Care, which is a mental health facility. And what they did was they put him in there for observation and evaluation. While he was there, one of the nurses he talked to believed him because she believed in earthbound spirits. So, and demonic spirits, they didn't know what it was. He thought it was either an angry spirit or a demonic spirit. Now, I must mention too that within the ghost hunting community, there is a belief. There's like uh, categories of these spirits. There's what they call poltergeist haunts. Then there's intelligent haunts, and then there is residual haunts, and then demonic haunts. So, we didn't know which one it was. I suspected it was demonic myself. Every time there was any kind of physical harm, I always thought for sure that it was probably demonic. But I started hearing a lot of stories of other investigators there was always spirits that would mimic like a child or like a woman that was being terrorized by another spirit there, and things like that. But it would always be something negative there also, you see. Um, so anyway, when the woman believed him, the nurse did, and she gave him a card, and it was my friend's card, and it was their paranormal team. Well, she had a team also, so she called us and asked us if we would take the case because she had other cases, and she had too many that she didn't have time. So we went ahead and took the case. And the week before we actually went and did the investigation, we did a preliminary investigation. We went there and we asked questions and we talked to them. Well, there's a teenage girl that lived there, and she started to what do you call that, she would talk to the spirit and the spirit took over her. Okay, she started to oh, what's it called, I'm trying to
Like
think of the
exhibit
name of it.
signs of possession or manifestation or
Absolutely. But it was where you allow the spirit to come in and talk through you.
oh
She
yeah,
was
like
doing
mediumship sort of
this.
channeling, right? Channeling.
That's it. Okay, she started channeling the spirit of what was claiming to be a little girl. And this spirit was saying that I guess it was acting like it was afraid that her father, which had killed her, was also there. His spirit was there too. And I think that what it was he had killed her, but he killed himself also. So he was there, and she was afraid of him and all this, and it was really weird, um, because later this spirit of the little girl actually claimed ownership of what had happened. She went ahead and she said that it was her that threw this man. So yeah, after what happened. But anyway, I'll get back to that. So we went ahead and we got ready for the investigation that following week. We was going to go back to do the full investigation when the guy, was released from the hospital or from the Circles of Care. So when that happened, we went there the next week. One of my team members had went to a priest and talked to them about the case, and he said he thought it was demonic, and he gave her some holy water. Well, we got there, we prayed, we sat in the van and we prayed for protection, and all this stuff. We was actually praying to Saint Michael too, the archangel, which you don't do that. But I didn't know that at the time. That was one of the things that we commonly did. Was we did it all the time when we would ask for protection. We was praying the that prayer, Saint Michael the archangel protection prayer. So we did that. Well, we went inside, and the guy, him and a couple of the other people, they left, and they were going to come back later that evening because they were going to allow us to have the whole house to ourselves. Well, what we did was we had a monitor station outside, and we had the other team members out there, and then we had the grandmother was there, the girl was there, the teenager girl, and then their grandmother was there. Well, so two of the investigators would go in at a time, and we would do little seances, and we would use dowsing rods. Now, me and my friend went in, and we was asking questions, and the door would open and shut, and then the dowsing rods was giving us some answers, and
What's
we
a dowsing rod, just for those who aren't familiar?
Oh, okay. It's actually L-shaped rods made out of copper. And in the old days, they used to call them, what was it, water witching they would use them for. They actually still do that. A lot of the companies that go around and dig for wells, they actually still use them. And it's divination, either way, but what they do is they ask questions holding the rods, and the rods would have a little cylinder piece that the rod would go into, and when you hold it in your hand, it would freely open or shut, and that's how you would get your answers. And before we would start a session, we would ask it, "What is your yes?" And it would either wise open or it would shut. And then we would say, "What is your no?" Just to make sure and confirm, the first answer. And sure enough, it would confirm. So we were doing that, and we was asking questions, and it was giving us answers. Well, then later that evening, the man come home. And when I say man, he was like maybe 20. He was young, but he was a young man. He was very tall. He was about 7 foot tall. He was a really tall guy. He really is. And so after he got there, we were talking about, what had happened so far that night. And he asked us, he said, "Do you want me to go in there with y'all?" And he said, "If I go in there with y'all, maybe it'll do something. Maybe it'll trigger it because it doesn't like me." So we were like, little, a little worried about him going in there, but we knew that he practically lived there anyway, because that's like his best friends, and he was always there. He didn't officially live there, but he was always over there. He was best friends with the young girl that lived there. And so we went ahead and took him in the room. He went in there with us. It was me and my daughter. We were sitting on the bed, and I had my little handheld camera, little infrared camcorder. And then my other teammate was in there, and he was going to use the dowsing rods and ask the questions. Well, then the man come in there, and he was standing up. Him and my friend was facing us, but they were up against the, up by the wall, but they were facing us. And he was sitting there, and he was asking questions. Well, when he was asking the spirit questions to provoke the spirit. Like he was saying, "Are you afraid of me? Are you afraid of Dawn? Are you afraid?" I'm also using other names. I just don't want to, for privacy purposes. But anyway, so he was asking it questions like that to try to provoke it. Well, then he said, "Are you afraid of Dawn?" And it said no. And then he says, "Oh, what was it? Are you afraid of me?" Or something. And then he said, "Well, why don't you come out so I can kick your," and he was really trying to, a spirit now. How are you going to do that? You know? But he was just trying to make it angry. And so when he did that, the rod opened, and when it did, it started to come back all the way. And then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, I mean, it sounded like the loudest crash. It literally sounded like a car hit the outside of the house. We didn't know what it was. I mean, I was just like, bam. And when that happened, I jumped up, and I'm trying to find. I'm like, what happened? And I mean, you can even hear it on there, because it was total confusion. We're like, what's happened? I turn on the light, and when I turned on the light, I turned around, and there he was. He was facing the wall, but he was laid down on the ground, and he was like like up against the wall. And where he landed at, there's a filing cabinet standing there, up against the wall, and he hit the corner of that and the wall, and you can see a dent where his head hit the filing cabinet. And so he was like just laying there, and he was just like out of it. He seemed to be. And we were like trying to get him to come to. And we were like, Don, what are you all right? And so we're also yelling for the other team members to come in there, because we didn't know if he was okay or not or what. And it took a few minutes for them to come in. Well, I didn't realize it at the moment, but when they came in, they were talking to him and everything, and then they said it just threw grandma off the porch. So it not only threw him in the wall, but it threw the grandmother off the porch at the same time. That's why it took them a few minutes to get in there. So it was just trying to show all of us, it was totally demonic. I mean, but the thing that confused me was after all this happened, okay, he got up and he started acting combative, and he was yelling, "Come out now," and all this. I mean, he was cussing. He was so mad because it did that to him again. And we're like, I mean, I couldn't believe he was even doing that. It's like, get out of there. And so he went out there, and we were still sitting in the room. A couple of us were still sitting in there. Well, then the guy that had the other team, we were there. It was both two teams there at the same time. It was my team and his team, the one that I used to work with. So they were there also. And he wanted to continue, start asking questions to find out who did that, why was it targeting him and all this stuff. Well, I was scared. I mean, I really was. I'm like, look what just happened. Are you crazy? Well, crazy as it sounds, we went ahead and I stayed in there because I'm like, okay, well, I got the camera. I'm going to have to sit here and record. So we went ahead and we started asking more questions. Well, the spirit of this young girl took ownership of what happened. She claimed responsibility. It was her that did it. And just to witness how hard that spirit threw him, you know what I mean? And then to think it was a little girl, things didn't add up. It just didn't add up. And then we had blog star shows back then. Our teams would have these shows, and we would, get together with the other people of the paranormal investigation community, and we would all get on with each other, and we would ask questions, and we talk about investigations that we had been on and the newest equipment that's come out and so on. Well, in these shows, I was hearing a lot of other groups talking about spirits mimicking other spirits. Now, that's one thing that there's hardly any investigator that will not admit that there are times that demonic spirits will mimic the dead, mimic like a little girl ghost or a woman in white or whatever. There's a lot of other things they claim to be, but except what they really are. But the only thing is, hardly any of them believe that it's always the case. They only believe that sometimes they mimic the dead. They don't believe that they always mimic the dead, that it's actually always demons. And that's something that they don't want to believe that. And if you bring it up, they get upset at you because I've brought it up, and well, what if these are all demons, and the first thing they say is, oh, you see a demon under every rock. You hear that kind of thing, and it's like, it's not that, but they really are mimicking the dead, because if you take that spirit, even if it says it's a little girl ghost, or if a spirit comes to you in the middle of the night and says it's that your dead mother or something, if you rebuke it in the name of Jesus, it always flees, no matter who it says it is. So, it always gives it away. It really does. And I suggest that anybody out there, if you have a spirit that's coming to visit you, test it, rebuke it in Jesus' name, and I guarantee you, it always flees at the name of Jesus.
Yeah, I think that's a really important point and clarification is that these spirits are not, at least as far as I'm concerned, they're not someone's dead grandmother. They're probably demonic. Well, they are, according to the Bible, demonic spirits, and they have the goal of deceiving people. So, how has your opinion of these sort of spiritual encounters and experiences changed since you've had that experience there?
Ever since that happened, that's when I started looking into that on YouTube, and I came across a very powerful testimony. It's Laura Maxwell. I don't know if you've ever heard of her, but she's an ex-spiritualist, and her mother ended up committing suicide because of these spirits. They were tormenting her. They would She would channel these spirits for people. They were ex-spiritualists, and it got to where it got so out of hand, they would just walk down the road and suddenly a spirit would take over her and start telling people stuff about themselves, and just without her trying to initiate any kind of session, it would just take over her and do it. Then these spirits would take her and throw her out in front of traffic, and it was trying to kill her. And she was put into mental institutions because, again, she would tell them what was going on, and they would, say it was a mental problem, that she really wasn't having these experiences, that it was all, mental. And so finally, Laura, a lady had invited them to church, and they went to church and they both accepted Christ, praise God for that. But they did not know about deliverance, and they did not, the spirits were still tormenting the mother. And, I think maybe it was because, some people accept Christ because they want help out of a situation, maybe, instead of actually really surrendering their life to Him, as in really truly becoming born again. And I don't know if that's what happened. Maybe that's what was the problem there. But whatever it was, it kept tormenting her. And one night she ended her own life because of it. So to this day, Laura still, she has a very powerful ministry, and she's I've been on a lot of her her podcast. We've had a lot of shows together and stuff. But very sweet, very loving lady. She has a heart for the lost. And she talks to other people, she gets their testimonies and so on. But so I started to look into these and hearing these testimonies. So I started reading the Bible. I finally got that old dusty Bible off the shelf. And I tell you, it's one thing to lead people to the Lord and to tell them the problem with the occult and these occult practices, but you really need to encourage them to read the Bible and to start studying the Bible for themselves, because that's where I went wrong all those years. I was going to church, but I didn't know the truth. I kept thinking there was wiggle room for all these things. I started believing in reincarnation. I started believing in, karma, and I thought I lived in a previous life. And I mean, it was really crazy. Now thinking back, I was borrowing from other worldviews, and even the Catholicism, I would go in there with my cross and my holy water, and prayers to Saint Michael, the Archangel, and things like that. And it was kind of like religious syncretism, because you believe in you borrow from other, religions and things too. But now looking back at it all, I'm like, wow, I can't believe, the stuff that I was believing at the time. And reading the Bible, it started really opening my eyes. But as I started reading the Bible, we started getting attacks in our home. Since that happened with my grandmother in her house, our activity that we would have at home wasn't much at all. I mean, here and there we would hear something in the other room and nobody was in there, but that was the gist of it. It wasn't like we weren't getting tormented. But until I started picking up the Bible and started reading it, when I started noticing these deceptions and these, that this truth about this little girl ghost, And I started praying about it too. I started asking God, are these the spirits of these little girl ghosts, or these, ghosts of dead family members, or are they really all demons? And he really truly was answering my prayers. Although what I was doing was allowing the stuff still to come in and torment us. We would wake up. Oh my goodness, we would hear noises. My daughter would be in the other room, and her noises would be so loud in her room. She would hear voices talking in her closet, and just all kind of stuff, scratching on the wall and things. And she would have to turn, she had a laptop, and she would turn the music on, and she would turn it up really loud just to drown out the noises, just so she can try to sleep. You would think she wouldn't be able to sleep with the music, but it was a more comforting thing than it was to hearing all this other stuff happening in her room. And with us, my husband, one night I had bought a book. It was called, oh, what was it? It was by Chip Ingram. I think it was called, oh, what was it? Oh, I should have had it with me. I'm sorry. But anyway, it was a Christian book, and it was talking about deliverance and prayers and all this stuff. Well, I got the audiobook, and one night I left it going next to my bed on my laptop. I left it, it was an 8 hour long audiobook. Well, as I was letting it play, I fell asleep and it was still playing. Well, my husband, now we were sleeping, and he woke up. Now he started getting uh what was that? Sleep paralysis, where he was getting attacks at night, and they were sexual attacks. I mean, he even woke up one night. Oh man, it was terrible. He woke up one night and he literally had bite marks in his groin area. And I woke up to hearing him in there saying, "I rebuke you now in the name of Jesus." And we had crosses, rosary beads. We had those up we had them up over the windows. We had them up over the doors. We didn't know what to do
Hmm.
because nothing was working. I was using the sage, I was using salt, I was using, like I said, the rosary beads. I had open Bibles in every room. I wasn't reading the Bibles that much at the time, you know what I mean? But those open Bibles don't have power. We have to read those Bibles in order for it to
Amen.
to do anything. But that's like some people think, if you leave an open what do you call it, an audio Bible playing in your house, it's going to ward off all the demons. That's not true. You can have it playing all day long, but if you're not applying it to your life, it's not going to have any power. What's that?
Yeah,
Serious.
that's
It
so
doesn't.
true. And the
Yeah.
way you're talking about the religious synchronicity too, the way that people, and I see this in my own life, people have these issues and they want to use Jesus, but they also want to use sage and Buddhism and all of these
Yeah.
other religions, and they just want to mix it together in a big melting pot. And God says very clearly, like, no, that's not how you get deliverance, right? It's not through this whole concoction of false religions being incorporated with Christianity. And what you're talking about, Dana, is really important because it's real, and we see biblical precedent for it being real too. Like I'm reading now from Mark 9 in the ESV, and this man
Yes.
comes up to Jesus and he has a demon possessed son, and he says, "Teacher, I brought my son to you, for he has a spirit that makes him mute, and whenever it seizes him, it throws him down, and he foams and grinds his teeth and becomes rigid." In other parts of scripture, we hear that these demons are throwing people into fire and water and really trying to harm them. And so, what we're learning about here today from you is the serious nature of the demonic realm. And so, one thing I like to ask everybody as we begin to sort of wrap up the conversation is, what advice do you have for people that were in the same position that you were at this time, right? So these kinds of, they're having these experiences at home. It's getting scary. They're starting to question a lot of what's out there. And there's so much false teaching also around how you should deal with these kind of issues, which I'm sure you've experienced, since you've started reading your Bible. You can see some of the inconsistencies that are taught to people about how to come out of this. So, what advice do you have to Christians or even non-Christians that are having these experiences?
What I would say is, and I want to say this to the non-Christians at first, and that is that even if it's against your beliefs, just test it. Just read what the Bible has to say about it. It doesn't really hurt. Hey, if it's the truth, that's all we really want anyway, because these things really won't stop until we get the truth, and then we get set free from it. And the only way to get set free from it is to really give our life over to Christ. Some people need deliverance. I mean, I did. Oh, I mean, I haven't even told that part, but some people need deliverance, but the thing about it is turning over our life to Christ and to not engage in these occult practices, because a lot of these things we really have to check what's keeping the door open, because these things are a clear invitation for these things to come in. And even if we say prayers of protection, God does not bless a sin. If we are in the midst of a sin, we can't pray for protection, for him to protect us from any implications from doing that sin, because that's like having our cake and eat it too. We can't do that. God tells us there's implications from doing these things, and he's not a liar. You know what I mean? He's telling the truth. And no matter what we do, if we continue doing it, see, with us, we were saying leave in the name of Jesus, the spirits would leave. But guess what? It was only until another night, because I was still engaging in these things and I wasn't totally giving my life over to Christ. I had not done that yet. So, we kept thinking, okay, Jesus is working, but we also was using the rosary beads. We really didn't know what was working. We knew that there was power in his name, though, because when we would say it, it would stop. Bam. That was it. Boom. It was gone. Just like these UFO experiences, same thing. It's the same thing. And they do the same things. It's very, I mean, later I even put all that together, that they are one and the same. They're all, it's deception. It's the great deceptions in the end days. And we're going through it. That's why you can't get on TV now and flip through the channels without seeing some kind of ghost hunting programs or something. I'm walking through the store during Christmas time, and I'm in the children's department, and I'm seeing ghost hunting meters, little fake ones for kids. Now, that's why my heart is so into helping other people, you know? And I believe that real, true freedom does not come until you help others get free. That's really a lot to do with it. And you know it, because I bet that's exactly how you feel, and the same thing that's happened with you. But it's that. And there's so many cases too that we had where it was children involved. And here I am. I had my kids involved in it, and I wasn't teaching them no better. I didn't know. And to this day, I still see damage that it's done, in my family. And these demons don't just come in our homes by way of paranormal activity. They come in through other ways too. We started having all kinds of problems, anger problems, drug problems, alcohol problems. There was many problems. They come in packs. I mean, really, it just opens the doors, and it's a full on assault to your whole family. It really is. And it got so bad, but I didn't know it at the time. But my mom told me after I left it all, she told me, she said, now my mom, mind you, she was a believer, but she didn't go to church. She was one of those that she believed in God and Jesus, but she didn't talk about it. It's not good to be that way though, because it's really good to be a witness for the Lord. But she still believed, and she told me, she said, Dana, I was praying that God would show you what these things really were. And that blew me away, of all people to tell me that. It was my mother. And I was like, whoa, she don't talk about God and all that, but he answered her prayer. He really did. And I tell you, these things, and you know what, the part that makes it so hard for people to come out of this deception is the fact that they want to be reassured that their dead loved ones are near them. They don't want to say goodbye. It ain't going to be goodbye. It's only until we go over to them, and according to what my Bible tells me, we do go to heaven or hell when we die. According to Luke 16, that's what it says. And it tells us right there. And then where is it? Is it Second Thessalonians or First Thessalonians, where it tells us, it says to tell them. It says it even tells us how to give the others, to comfort each other with these words, and that we will meet them together when they come with God,
Mm.
when they come with Jesus in the cloud, and then we will meet them. It tells us right there. And then it says at the end, it says, comfort each other with these words. That's what we should tell people right there. Hey, you will see your dead loved ones again one day. And I do believe, like I said, that's the biggest part of this deception is, believe. And that's why we want to hold on to it, because there's been people that I would go to a church and I have told my testimony, and people walk up to me afterward. They say, I really loved your testimony and everything, but I have a problem. My father came to me when he died. And it is so hard to look at that person that has tears in their eyes, and they want to hold on to that. And I have to tell them, honey, it really wasn't your father. They're lying to you. There's a bigger lie behind it all. They want you to think that you have time. You don't have to worry about salvation, because afterwards, there's not a hell to worry about. That's a lie. That we already know about the beggar and the rich man. And the rich man went to hell. He lifted his eyes up. That tells me it was instantaneously. Next thing it says, then he lifted up his eyes and he was in torment. And it's a torment flame. It's
Amen.
not just a metaphor. It's a real true. And he even begged Father Abraham, go tell my brothers in my father's house not to come to this place of torment. And what did he say? He said, though one come back from the dead, they will not believe. If they don't listen to Moses and the prophets, they will not believe that one come back from the dead. And then it said, besides all this, there's a great gulf fixed. That tells me it's in place, it's fixed. And if you go to hell or to heaven, you can't come back and forth, to go warn someone and go back. If God's not going to allow them to come back from the dead to warn us for the salvation's sake, he's not going to allow them to come back and say, just to say, I'm okay, that I'm comforted in God's hands. That's a lie. It's a lie. And there's a many lies with that ghost earthbound spirit theory, because not only that, when we were doing these ghost hunts, there were table tipping sessions that we did, that we sat there and thought we were actually leading these spirits to the light. Not
And what does
only
that
did I think,
mean? Sorry, Dana. What does that mean? Table tipping. What is?
I'm sorry,
It's
table
okay.
tipping, say it's a seance where everybody that's participating, they sit at the table and they hold hands, and they all have to be in agreement for this spirit to come through. See, that tells you something right there too. They have to be in agreement. They can't be anybody there, say that's a Christian, that says, I feel weird about this, I really hope it doesn't come through. No, you have to all be in agreement for it to happen. So we would all sit there. I would ask questions, as I actually was taking the place as a medium, and I would ask questions, and then I would say, I would feel like it, a message or whatever, and I would bring up this message, and I would say, is this message for so and so, because I got that name. And it would I would say knock once for yes, two for no, and then I would get it. It would validate, okay, yes, this was what I, it was yes or no or whatever. But the thing about it was, we would sit there and we'd ask questions. Well, one investigation I went on, and not to get off track here, but there was one investigation we went on, and I had what we call, it was a ghost box. And a ghost box is a modified radio, to where you take, well, anyway, you modify it to where it constantly searches a station, and it doesn't stop on a station. It just keeps searching it, and you'll hear, like when you ask questions, you'll hear a answer. You'll hear like a yes or a name or something like that. So we would ask questions, and it would give us that a name. You would hear it come through. But even though it still would not just stop on a station, it wouldn't do that because it's been modified. Well, one of the table tipping sessions we did, we were talking, and all of a sudden my ghost box turned on. I didn't even have it on. We were just asking questions. It come on, and this song come on. It stopped and it played the entire song. It was a Christian song about going home. So we're all sitting there and we're talking to the spirit back and forth. And then this song comes on talking about going home. We all start weeping because we're thinking, oh, this spirit wants to go home. And, now we need to help it go to the light and all this. Well, sure enough, we start going into this, with this spirit, and led this spirit to the light. Now, what does that tell you? We're taking the place of Jesus, right? We're sitting there leading the spirit to the light, saying basically what we're doing when we do that, we're saying Jesus can't get them there. We have to do it. And that is, it's crazy thinking, to even think that we were able to do that. But that was one of the things. We not only thought we was helping people that had haunted homes to get rid of spirits, we thought we were also helping the spirits get to the light, which is, what do they call it? Post-mortem salvation. It's false.
It
Even
is.
some Catholics, it's false, but that's another belief, see, that we were mixing in with our beliefs. And had I read the Bible, I would have known that that was not true, that these spirits were lying to us.
Exactly. In
So,
Hebrews, it says it's appointed for man to die once and then comes judgment. There's no process after that. And even with these practices we're talking about now, it brings to mind Deuteronomy 18, where the Lord says, there shall not be found among you anyone who burns his son or daughter as an offering, anyone who practices divination or tells fortunes or interprets omens or a sorcerer or a charmer or a medium or a necromancer or one who inquires of the dead. Like God could not make it clearer in his word. And if you think you're going to come to truth through something that God has forbidden, you're sorely mistaken. And I do resonate deeply with what you're saying, Dana, about it's an emotional thing, isn't it? Telling somebody, hey, look, that's not your mom. Like, as comforting as that might feel, that's demonic. There's not a lot
yes.
that's more offensive to say to an unbeliever than that. But at the same time, Christians are called to speak the truth in love. And unfortunately, I mean, we could talk all day, but we've reached about an hour now. Was there anything else you wanted to say before we wrap up, Dana?
Just that, to please just set your emotions aside and just consider what we're saying, and that just I can't even emphasize enough how important it is to just read the Bible. And we're not just trying to be Bible thumpers, or people think that, if they don't believe, they think, oh, they're just, trying to shove the Bible. But honestly, it's the truth. And you'll find out it's the truth, because, and please don't read the Bible just to prove that you're right. Read the Bible with an open heart for the truth. And God says, in the Bible, that if you seek, you will find. If you're truly seeking the truth, you'll find it. But if you're seeking to try to disprove the Bible, you're not going to find the truth. It's not going to happen. And
Amen.
but I, you know, it's just to read the Bible and to have an open heart and to pray about it. Just pray about ask God to show you the truth, because you know what? If it is not your dead mother or father, wouldn't you really want to know? Because they're imposters. They're imposters. And wouldn't you really would rather know, if your mother or father was a believer, wouldn't you rather know that they're with Jesus with no more tears, no more suffering? I would rather know they're there instead of here seeing all this suffering. And I mean, surely they can't just sit there and watch all this suffering and not get upset. And it's just, that's not the way it is. But
Absolutely.
just having a
So, Dana, another really important question I had for you is, when was your come to Jesus moment? You describe it in other podcasts that you've done of this experience that you had with a minister. Can you explain a little bit about that to the audience?
Yes. Well, what happened? It things just got so bad in the house, and a spirit showed itself to my grandson, and he was only between 3 and 4 at the time. And I said, that's enough. I drew the line and I told my husband, I said, look, we need to go see a minister. We need to find out about this. And I kept thinking since he was getting attacks that he had an attachment or something, a demonic attachment. So I said, okay, we need to get him to a minister to get deliverance. That's what I was thinking. So we went the next week, and after the service was over, we walked down the aisle, and I asked the pastor, the preacher there, look, we've got all this activity in the house. My husband keeps getting attacks. And I said, I don't know, what's doing it. I think it might be an attachment that I had from another investigation. And I explained to him what I did. And he looked at me and he said, honey, you got to stop doing what you're doing. He said, that's the occult. He said, that's what's doing all this. And I looked at him and I was like, it was weird because as much as I usually would have rejected that, because I really enjoy doing the investigations, um, it was like God had me ready to accept it at that time. I accepted it and I was like, okay, wow, I just got to stop doing what I'm doing. And when the preacher went to pray with us, he looked over and he seen my husband had on a rosary bead necklace. And he asked him, he said, why do you have that on? And I explained to him, I said, well, it's for protection. I said, I got them all over my house. I don't know, we're doing everything we can. And he looked at him, he said, please take that off. And I looked at him and I says, why did you ask him to take that off? And he said, honey, you have to realize when you put your faith in an object, you're taking your faith off Jesus. It's Jesus and him alone that's going to give you freedom. And it was like an epiphany moment. Like no other. It was like my eyes were open and I was like, okay, now I know it's not all these other things. It's Jesus and him alone. I just got to have faith in him. He's the one. That's all I need. And it was just something else. And then we went ahead and we gave our life over to Jesus. And I mean, and when I did, I said, that's it. That's it. I turned my back on all the stuff I was doing and just wanted to start living for him. So, and I tell you, since that happened, my life has really turned around. It really has. The Lord has got our backs. He really does. He protects us. And it's like nothing else. It really is. But I just wanted to share that with you guys that you don't have to use sage and salt and all that. Turn to the Lord. That's all you need. It's all you need. With an open heart and wholeheartedly turn to him.
Amen.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's really powerful. I'm so glad that you could share that experience, and what an encouragement that God's people are used to deliver people from this deception, just like you are now, even in this conversation. So thank you very much.
Thank you. You're welcome. Thank you.
I think it's going to be bye from both myself and Dana for now. Dana and I will, of course, pray and chat a little bit after this, but thank you all for watching, and God bless you.